going to tie a Simple Nymph. Begin with a Tiemco 2457. This happens to be in a size 14. We'll tie this anywhere down from an 18 up to about a 12. The limitation on the size at the upper end is because of the length of the peacock curl. Thread I'm using is 17-aught uni. I tie it in about the third of the way back from the eye and bring it back into the butt of the hook. I've got a piece of large D-rib that I've cut a taper in. And what I'm doing is increasing the height of the nymph. I like that nice curve. I'll also take lead and substitute lead to really get this baby to drop. Now tie it in at one end of it, and I'm going to take a blade and just push it and taper it at the other end. So I'm going to get that build up, that ugly hump. And just push. It's actually, in a way, think of it as being parallel to the hook shank. See, I get that nice taper. I just wrap it down to the hook shank, and I'm going to coat it so it's got thread all the way through it. And lash that. Just keep the D-rib on the top of the hook. I'm trying not to lose as much gape. Keep as much gape as I possibly can. Now I'm going to take this thread and wrap it back into where I tied in the D-rib. And I've got two pieces of peacock curl, two contrasting. This happens to be a sulfur and a dark brown. Now I take a little bit of super glue, and what it's going to do is help strengthen my peacock stems. And I'll spread it around, not very much. I just need it to adhere to the bottom of have the peacock stems adhere to the D-rib. I'll spread it around. If you look at my bodkins, they're actually the darts from blowgun. They're really sharp, they're cheap, and they're the perfect size. I'm taking that peacock and I'm tying in at that butt section. And I take the excess and keep it under the bottom of the D-rib, under the bottom of the shank of the hook. And I'll just break it off when I get to the end. I'm going to tie off my thread because I've got to wrap that peacock, concentric wraps, and I don't like to lose my thread. Now just take those thread wraps and I'll bring it up to the front. Now I need to make sure it's not real critical, but I like each wrap to butt up against the previous wrap. Even if it shows through though, you really can't tell. This process I'm using, what it does is let me have that beautiful segmentation that I get from the peacock stems. And at the same time, I get the iridescence from the little cilia. So it's just a little minor technique, but it really looks, I think it really adds something to the fly. And I need to tie it off again because I'm going to take an electric eraser and erase the cilia that I don't want. I'm just going to try to keep the cilia on the bottom section, which would be gills basically on a nymph. So I take a little saliva and I wet that down. And I take my electric eraser, just rub that off. You could try it without an electric eraser. It might really work, but this is just a little more expedient. And see how it exposes the stems of the peacock? It's just gorgeous. It looks gorgeous. I think it looks gorgeous. I'm going to wet it again. I'm just blowing it off with some canned air. And now I'm going to coat it with UV resin. And it's going to really pop the segmentation, as well as add like a magnifying glass to it. At the same time, I still get that iridescence from peacock curl. Now I want that UV resin to come down right before the hairs start. And even it goes into it, it doesn't look bad, because if you look at a real nymph, where that smooth section on the nymph and the hairs adjoin, it's kind of rough and it goes a little dark, especially on a scud. What's nice about UV resin is it's self-leveling. I'm going to hit it with my UV light. Now, certain sections don't cure as well with that light, and so I'm going to take my laser and hit it again. You'll see that little wisp of smoke coming up. That means that's some of the UV resin that hadn't cured, and that laser's at 200 milliwatts, and it's punching out a little bit of power. You can actually light a match with it, and the sulfur tip matches. And if you point at your finger, you can feel it burn, but it really, really cures that UV resin really well. Now I'm going to change the position of my cook, because I want that section right behind the eye to be horizontal. It'll just make it easier to tie in my legs and my thorax. Now bring my thread back into the thorax, beginning of the thorax, and I've got a piece of medallion sheeting. And I've cut it, it's about 3/16 of an inch wide. I'm going to leave it there. Then I've gotten some CDC, and I'm going to make a little dubbing brush out of it. I'm going to split the 17-aught thread. If you let it spin out and you use the sharp bodkin, not a problem to split it. I've been doing it for years now. Got my little pettigene tool and grab some CDC feathers. I'm going to spin it to create a dubbing loop. Now as I wrap this CDC, I'm going to comb back the fibers to the back. I like the effect that CDC has in the water. I know everybody likes to use it for dries, but I love it for wet nymphs. It just moves. Even when there's no current, it just breathes. And it traps air bubbles, which gives it even more of a buggy effect. Now I'm going to take a partridge feather that's been dyed brown. I see I've cut a V out of it, and it's just to add another texture to my legs. And that V, cutting that V, it also gives me a spot where I can pull my medallion sheeting over so that I know I'm splitting that baby in half exactly. Pull my medallion sheeting over and tie it off right behind the eye. I'm going to use a pair of convex nail clippers. You got to be careful with them because I'll actually cut the thread if I don't watch out. And it cuts it to the quick. I actually saw them used to build rods for the wraps on the guides, and it really trimmed off that thread really close. And 2 wraps of 3, whip finished. I'm going to take a bit of, trim that off and take a bit of marker just to cover that white thread. Now I'm going to take another extra spot of UV resin and coat that head or thorax. Once again, hit it with my UV light. And that's my little simple nymph.